Welcome to Rugby Uncovered. We're Tom Nash and Paul Rodriguez. We have a special guest on the show, Harlequins Swedish international Tove Viksten. Tove, thanks ever so much for joining us.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. Thank you.
It's been a very special weekend for you and your teammates. Did you think of it in those terms, or was it just a job done and move on to the final?
No, I think we're all really aware about the significance of, one, being able to finish off the season. I think we all were left quite disappointed across, even if it's the right decision to cancel last season. So it feels like it's been time now, and it's definitely a big thing. A semi-final isn't just another game, it is a semi-final, and we came in, we prepped a lot, and we know the Wasps are such a strong team, so we there's no taking the foot off the pedal quite yet.
Sure. You joined Quins in 2017, I think I'm correct in saying.
Yeah, I did.
What brought you from Sweden to England?
Gary Strait did. So he and a couple of the Quins coaches that year came to one of our open camps in Sweden. So we usually have an open camp every year where we have international coaches, but any player in Sweden who's keen to play international rugby come for that type of selection camp. And Gary Strait was there, Ali Mortimer was there, both for Quins. And I had a chat with Gary after the camp, who said that he thought we'd played well and that I'd been playing well. So I asked him if they had an extra space for a prop, and then he said, well, we might consider you. And then 2 months later, I lived in the UK.
Fantastic. And is that what the Quins coaching team do regularly? Go over to Sweden to have a look at prospective players, or
no? So since that camp, I can't remember actually if we've had an open camp, because we haven't had it with the pandemic. And then I think we did the year after, but then we had Claire, who's Edinburgh coach and now coaches Sweden. So not from Quins every year, no.
We have spoken on this show to the RFUs, women's RFUs in Germany and the Netherlands and the Czech Republic. You guys were on holiday when we tried to get through to you last summer.
Oh.
But what does a 10-year-old girl in Sweden need to do if she is curious about rugby and wants to give it a try?
Just contact the nearest club. So there are clubs across the country. They're not a huge amount, but most of them will have a setup, and often training with a boys team at that age. So you should be able to just put into Google rugby in your area and try and find a club. All the clubs in Sweden are super accommodating. They're really nice, and they're just built on people who are really passionate. So there is a space for girls who want to play rugby, but it's definitely an area, especially in Sweden, that needs to be developed.
Sure. I mean, it's a massive country. How many clubs are there, roughly?
There are more clubs than there are opportunities. So if you look at 15s, for example, there might only be 5-6 clubs when I played who are able to put out a full 15s team. But when that's split into the 7s, so you usually played 7s in the spring and 15s in the fall. So you'll have a lot more 7s clubs than you will have 15s. Yeah. And we use a lot of collaborations between clubs just to create opportunities for young people. So children and adolescents who want to play rugby will often play maybe for a different team if there's not enough players that time. So I couldn't tell you how many clubs there are, but there's not a huge amount for women's games.
Sounds similar to Germany and to the Netherlands from our experience.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah. Well, it's encouraging. It's exciting. It's growing.
Yeah. We had an upswing when rugby came into the Olympics. There was definitely a wave that we could ride on. I think that's the interesting bit, that it has to be the higher the profile gets in other countries, the better it gets in Sweden and other areas.
You and Victoria Pettersson and Paulina Torreseder at Exeter. Can your friends and your family and maybe fans watch your games from Sweden?
Yeah, so anything that's sent online, they log on to. So I know that my friends and my family have used when the RFU send our games, or when it's streamed on Facebook and things like that. So then they can watch it online. Yeah.
Right, brilliant.
Yeah.
Now, there are a number of you who represent your countries in sevens and 15s.
Yeah.
Is that sustainable? Do you think you can carry on doing that for the rest of your career, or is there going to be a split between the two formats?
So we did have a split. There was a split made. It must have been 2 years ago now, because then everything was quiet over COVID. So 2 years ago, they decreased the amount of players for the sevens and cut that squad a bit smaller. And we then have completely separate at the minute. We've got some girls who want to play crossover, but we haven't since. And that's been partly COVID and not being able to play much rugby.
Right.
But it's difficult. It's always wanting to specialise in two different parts of rugby, but for a small country, playing club sevens and club 15s is often the only way to get consistent games across the year. Especially at grassroots level, looking at playing rugby is better than not playing rugby. Internationally, it's more difficult when you have to have a performance set. But the girls who have done both, I did both was it 2 or 3 years ago? And as long as the games don't clash, it was fine. But I'm also obviously not a typical sevens player.
Right.
Yeah.
But you and your colleagues went to a colossal amount of trouble to sustain that, to do all the traveling, and to some cases having to pay for yourselves. And
and I think that in England is so far ahead in their rugby, just with the amount of girls that are playing and the funding that comes in. But for me, growing up as a rugby player in Sweden, that's what we've always done. I used to play for Gothenburg when I lived in Linköping. It's a 3.5-hour drive. So that's what we did then. Every Thursday we drove from uni down to training and then back up again to go to uni Friday morning or work. And that's just what you have to do if you want to play performance rugby. And I think that's the difficulty that they have in Sweden, is that it's quite far to go. The opportunity is there. But often players do look to come and play internationally if they want to do a big, if life allows.
Yeah. And what about your dad? He's a fan? Has he ever been able to watch you? And
so he watches everything he can online. And he's flown over a couple of times to the big games and to the final. And he used to play. So that's how I got into rugby from the start, was being kind of one of the kids around the rugby pitch. But yeah, no, he comes when he can. Obviously, we haven't travelled now since March last year, so it's been a while. But yeah, him and mum comes around as well when she can.
Oh, brilliant. And they both played in their time.
Mum didn't. No, mum's not very. Mum loves that I play rugby, but I think that's the extent of her interest. My dad used to play for the local club, and he used to manage the Sweden international women's squad and help out.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah,
we've seen amazing improvements, advancements in this sport in the 2 years that Paul and I have been doing this. What is the next step, do you think, for women's rugby first in England and maybe in Sweden as well?
I think with the development, it's becoming increasingly professional, isn't it? And some of the girls are full-time. Some of us, I work full-time on the side of rugby. And I think that it will increase to just build the level. And at some point it is going to become more professional than us amateurs, I guess, or hobby rugby players. I think, as it's been discussed before, but it's really difficult, even international rugby, when England's got their full-time program, playing girls who work full-time, and the amount of training that a full-time player can get in. And I think that gap might and will start to show, and is showing in some clubs, even within the country. So I think that is something that is going to change with time. It'll be another while, but I think that's where it's heading. And internationally it will be the same, to we have to keep striving to be better and to be able to put as much effort into and time into rugby as we all want to.
Sure. Well, the standard is unrecognisable, almost unrecognisable compared with 2 years ago. But what Paul and I set up to do was to get you guys talking to us, because we've been to rugby matches where nobody has known any of the players on the pitch, and is at the other end of the spectrum from football in a way.
Yeah.
And you all have much more interesting personalities, so we thought we would talk to you guys instead. It's been a complete pleasure for the 2 years that we've been doing it. And you did a lovely piece with Brentford schools, didn't you? Was it earlier this year when you did the Brentford school girls?
Yeah, for the sports day.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, we have more time, having to have a job, having to not doing full time. We have to develop other skills than just being an athlete. That is more than enough for those who are. But I think it exposes us to other parts of the world.
Next weekend,
yes.
What will you do between now and then, as a team, as a squad, in terms of training, etc.?
Oh, we continue training as we have. I think we have built really nicely throughout the season, and we are in a really good space. Things are not just starting to come together, but have come together in a lot. And I think we showed that at the platform that we could provide against Wasps, that it's very much in a place where we're comfortable. We just have to continue training in the way that we have, really. We know we've played Saris enough times now to know what they have to offer, and we have trained together as a squad for a long time. It's been since the season was cancelled last year, so it's long preseason and long time to build, and I think that we've built in up to this game really, really well. We just have to go out and perform, and I think that's the good part about a semi-final final, is that you there's no way out. There's nothing else to do than to play.
Sure. But after 9 months of rugby, are you not scaling down the intensity a tiny bit after all this time before it's a final, but surely your bodies need a bit of rest after
I think
all that time.
what we've done at Quins and our S&Cs and our coaches have done a really good job is to have down weeks throughout the season. So if we haven't had a game on the weekend, we've managed to have a couple of days off or low impact training. So we've trained throughout, but it has been up and down a deloading weeks so that we can come in, because we don't go into a season thinking that we're going to be done after the games, but we are pushing to be able to have bodies that can keep up the work throughout the final, and then we can have our downtime. And it'll be good to have a couple of weeks off and just disconnect mentally and physically, but we're not in a place where we're tired and anything like that. I think we've built well into the finals.
I hope.
I hope so.
Thank you so much, Tove. Just before you go, for people who want to follow you, how would they do that? Are you on Instagram or Twitter?
I am on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter. So it's TOVVIS on Instagram. It's a locked profile, so you'll have to follow request.
Right.
But you can follow me there.
So fans can follow you there. And look, it's going to be a cracking final. You can't miss it. Can't wait to see it. Best of luck.
No.
All the very best.
Thank you so much. It's one you don't want to miss.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic stuff. All the very best. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.